Hey everyone, it's Sarah from Apricot Polka Dot, and today we are going to talk about pom-poms and how to make the perfect pom-pom. So let's get started. To make the perfect pom-poms, you're going to need a few things. You're going to need a pom-pom maker, which I really prefer buying a pom-pom maker from the craft store or from Amazon. This is actually my favorite kind. They stay together in one piece, so it makes it really easy to make your pom-poms. They also sell plastic kinds like this that actually have two different parts, and then you have to kind of hold them together while you make your pom-pom. They also work great, but I actually prefer the kind that all is sort of together in one piece. It just makes it easier to hold. And I will link to my favorite makers on Amazon in the below portion. You also need a pair of scissors. I'm pretty picky about my pom-pom scissors. I actually have one pair of scissors to do the cutting around the pom-pom maker and then another for trimming the pom-pom, but I'm particularly picky about it. So you maybe could just get away with just one pair, but I have two favorites. You will also need yarn. My favorite brand is actually from Hobby Lobby. It's the I Love This Yarn brand. It comes in tons of colors and it makes a really good soft pom-pom. I also really love just the Red Heart Super Saver brand. It also makes a really great pom-pom. I have found that if the yarn is a little too cheap and too plasticky, it sort of doesn't form a very fluffy pom-pom, and so I sort of stay away from the really cheap stuff. I also have found that certain kinds like this, it's beautiful yarn and it's great if you're just going to put it in with other colors, but the way that this this yarn is sort of shiny-ish, it actually doesn't make a great pom-pom by itself. It sort of will not form the circle right. So there are certain kinds that work better than others, but for the most part, you can actually use pretty much any yarn. Okay, so we need our pom-pom maker, and we're going to open up one half of the pom-pom maker. And then you need to find your end of your yarn, and that is where we're going to begin. So this is a pretty simple process. You're just going to hold this yarn in place and you're going to just wrap and wrap and wrap until your pom-pom maker is pretty full. So we're gonna do that really quick. We're gonna do this whole half. Okay, now as you can see, I am pretty full here in the center. That is how I like my pom-poms to be. I like them to be really full and fluffy. And so if you can see, I have like more than a straight line at the bottom, and that's how I sort of know that I'm done. It's sort of overflowing at the bottom. So then you're going to hold onto your yarn. I like to just kind of pull it behind it just to keep it from falling out, and then you're going to just shut that half, and your yarn is still over here. Now you could cut the yarn if that makes it easier for you. I find that I just keep, if I'm using the same color, I'm just going to keep going on the other side, and you're just going to do the exact same thing, wrapping and wrapping over and over, just kind of making sure to get all over the pom-pom maker. Okay, now we are about at the same spot. See how I've got a nice full inside part there. We're just going to hold that yarn again to make it tight so it doesn't fall out. And then I'm just going to trim the end of our yarn. So now we have all of our yarn on our pom-pom maker. You're going to need another piece of yarn to tie your pom-pom together, and so I usually just use the same yarn that I was using. Unless it's a particularly thick yarn, then you'll probably want to use something a little thinner just for convenience of tying. It makes it harder to tie if you have a really thick yarn. So I just cut, and I always like to cut a little longer than I even think it's going to be, because it's easier to tie if you have more yarn than less yarn. Now we're going to cut our pom-pom off the maker. So this is where I like to use a really pointy pair of scissors. These are actually, we'll see if we'll get in focus here. These are actually the brand is the Paper Studio, and they are really sharp at the end. And I love that for doing my cutting off of the pom-pom, because it helps to make it easy to get it off. So we're going to just start, you go down the middle of your pom-pom maker, and you're just going to start cutting it off. But you don't want to pull it apart yet, because if you do, it's all going to just go everywhere. Now I have my little center string that I used. I'm going to trim that part too. That was just when I wrapped over to the other side. Just make sure you cut through that as well. And then you just start going on the other side. But again, don't open it up yet, or you will have yarn scraps everywhere. Now we're going to tie our string around the middle of our pom-pom. So you're just going to go directly into the center of our pom-pom like that. So you just kind of snap it in. That's why there's that center part. And you're going to pull it around to the other side. And now we're going to just make a knot so that it goes into the middle of our pom-pom maker. Knot that really tight. Now we can actually take our pom-pom off the pom-pom maker. So you undo that side, undo the other side, and then this little maker pulls apart. And we're left with a fun little pom-pom. Now, if you want your pom-pom to be kind of fun and fringy, you can just kind of leave it as is, but I usually like to trim mine up a little bit, give them a little haircut, and that's actually what you're doing. You're just kind of giving this pom-pom a haircut. So I like to cut off, sometimes you may want to use the long ends that you used for tying up your pom-pom, you may want to use those to tie it, like make an ornament or hang it from something, so you may want to keep those on there. But for the sake of this, I'm actually going to trim them off, and then you just kind of want to go around and you're going to want to trim off just any part that doesn't make it really round. So for me, this pair of scissors, these are Fiskar brand, and I just have found that they trim my pom-poms so well. I just love this pair of scissors. I haven't found another pair that I love quite so much for trimming. My very first pair was actually a pair of like hair cutting scissors, and they worked really well, and then they broke and I couldn't find the exact same ones. So I was on the hunt for my favorite pom-pom trimmers, and these were the ones that won. So anyway, and you just keep kind of fluffing it as you go. I like to fluff it because sometimes some of the little strands get kind of stuck underneath, and so if you trim it and fluff it as you go, you can kind of pull up some of those little strands that might have gotten stuck. You just keep going until it's perfectly round. And that is it, my friends. You just have a lovely pile of fuzz and a perfect pom-pom afterward.